Well, good morning, good afternoon, like Tim said. Today we will be going through Azure DevOps and getting into the weeds a little bit about what it can do and what it can do for your organization. So without further ado, so let's talk just a little bit about what DevOps is in general. So DevOps is the union of people, process, and technology brought together to enable continuous delivery and value to your end users. A little bit of history about it. Pre-2007, there were some lean manufacturing that was done, and a lot of it come from the car manufacturing. So Toyota came up with the Kanban boards. A little bit later, we started using it more for software. So that would have been around 2007, 8, I think, is around the time a lot of people got together and came up with this notion of agile. And through that, a lot of books came out, and a lot of people were going through and trying to learn how to adopt what the car manufacturing did to software development and software engineering. So fast forward to today, we have a lot of different methodologies that everybody uses, and what makes them special is we all work together with the people and the processes and all of those technologies together. And what that allows us to do is what the car manufacturing industry did was continuously deliver a product. So we plan out our work and we track that. We go through development. We build and test those software pieces, deploy them out, and then operations takes over. We monitor and learn from what we put out there, and then all that gets fed back into the funnel, and we go into another cycle. So that's pretty much what DevOps is. And at the end of the slide, if you guys have any questions, just type it in the chat or whatever, or come on and ask your question. Let Tim know. I can't see any of the comments that are out there in the chat right now. But I mean, as far as getting questions in, just let Tim know, okay?
Yep, I'm following along, Shad.
Okay, good.
Yep.
So companies who implement DevOps, they have a lot of different things that goes on for them. So one of the biggest things is the deployment frequency really goes up. Faster time to market. So once these processes get put into place, you have really lower change failure rates that go out, faster lead times for those changes. All of that increases your revenue across the board. Then should something go wrong in that, you can always roll it back, and it's faster mean time to recover from it. So this process of DevOps and all the people integrated in with that process makes this way faster. And all these things could be realized if you just go through and implement these processes. So let's talk about a little bit about what the problems with it is today. So just because we're using it doesn't mean that we don't have people that constantly complain about it. I, as a developer and coming from a developer background, I can certainly relate to every one of these statements that are out there. I can remember getting through and getting to a certain spot, and the first one comes up where it's like, ops keeps slowing us down. Well, of course they do, because we always conflict between development and operations because we think they don't move fast enough. Those are the guys that are just sitting there looking at the servers, and it's really tedious because we move at a certain pace, but yet they're trying to make sure that from a security standpoint, we're not leaving ourselves out to get in trouble with anything, and certain things have to be done. But if things do go a little faster, sometimes some things get missed. So that second bullet point there of it works over here, but it doesn't work in this other environment. I have no idea how many times I've heard this, I've seen it, and it takes a lot of time to sit and look through how it was configured and then figure it out. And it's usually one simple thing, but things do get missed. From an SDLC standpoint, not being able to do every step of this, and it seems big and tedious. Well, that's what a process is, and unless you follow it, you're not going to get the advantages of actually going through it. But just because that there is steps in it, it doesn't mean that it has to be laborious on the person that's doing it. So we try to get that to where it's a little bit faster. And of course, the next one, testing is always laborious. Going through and setting up test plans and making sure that what you're pushing out is very tedious. It takes a lot of work. Making those tests, things change and having to go back through and make the changes. And then the next thing, you automate it up. Just keeping up with it seems like a full-time job most of the times. And then from a security processing standpoint, if it does move too quick, like I said, things get missed. And so you try to make sure that you've got the proper amount of security that's in there, and then make sure that the process is wrapped around it to tightly pull these things together. So pretty much that's what Azure DevOps does. So as a product offering from Microsoft, they saw a need in the market. There's not a platform that's out there that brings all of these processes and technologies together inside of one cohesive package. Just because it's a Microsoft product, it doesn't mean that it's just Microsoft-centric, which we'll kind of get in here in a little bit. But what it actually brings is your boards for the Kanban board so that you can see what's going on in your organization and you can see how work is tracking and your teams can see their work and they can move items around. Think of the sticky notes on the walls, or if you're using Jira, it's much the same. Azure Repos, that's your Git repositories or your Team Foundation Server Control repository, but that's where you keep your code. Azure DevOps integrates in with Git already, and you can pull code from other sources as well. Azure Pipelines, that is your kind of workflow that you go through to pull together and do some processing behind the scenes. So think of it as your build server, your deployment server, and that's where you go to push work around. Azure Test Plans is where you go to make your tests, and you can do manual testing, but you can also track automated testing inside of there. So it's got some plugins that you can use and click on it and then bring up a web screen and kind of click through. Azure Artifacts, that is where you can put some code libraries, so components, any kind of code that you reuse across many different projects can be put out here inside of this Azure Artifacts. And then those get pulled into your pipelines as things get built, and so it's pulling from the same source. So it's kind of an overview. I'm going to go through each one of these individually, and you know, like I said, let me know if you guys have any questions as we go along the way. So from an Azure Boards perspective, like I said, this is where we combine the Kanban boards, and it's got drag and drop sprint planning inside of it. It's got some pretty comprehensive traceability. You use it for reporting, so it's a perfect home for all of your items. Your backlog items get groomed inside of here. You can see over on the left, they've got backlogs, sprints, queries, and plans, and all those things work together so that as you add your items in for your teams to do, you can see who's doing it and where in the process that it's at. These items also get pulled into Visual Studio or Visual Code, VS Code. So as you're doing your work, you know, you can connect up to this and actually see, here's my work items that I need to do. And as I churn through them throughout the day, it updates these boards. So as a stakeholder or as a PM person, I can go out here and I can visibly see how my work's doing. It also integrates with GitHub, so any of the commits and pull requests will come through on this too. And I think from a burn down perspective, it's got some pretty cool graphs that you can see. And if you were wanting to turn this around and really show it off, it makes for good reporting. All of this is consumable inside of Power BI too. So if you've got an extra, you know, reporting platform that's out there. Next up is Azure Repos. So with this, this is where you can collaborate in on your code. It is actually where your code is stored. So think of it back as a Team Foundation server or a Git library that's out there. But it already works with your Git client as it is today. A lot of people are using Git. So You can integrate this in, just ask for usernames and passwords and things like that, and it gets it going. You can also do your code reviews out here via your branch pulls and requests. You can set up branch policies and then also build validations. And it's pretty easy to migrate if you're using GitHub into this. You just kind of pull it in. Of some of the other cool things that are out there too is it's got a lot of webhooks and API integrations. So as you think of a process and as you're defining how your builds go and your pulled requests go, you can also hook into other services that are out there and integrate those into how those processes go. From a code searching standpoint, if you're ever looking for something, you can always come back to your repo and do a code search and find out really quickly who changed what and when, what change set it was in, and all the way back up to if you were doing a release to what release that went out into. So tracking down a bug and where it went out and who missed it becomes very easy by going through the repos. All right, next up is Azure Pipelines. This is kind of like the meat and potatoes of the whole thing. So the boards are great, the code is great, but this is really what makes it sing. With Azure Pipelines, this is your launchpad for all your code. It's where you do all your automating for your builds and deployments so that you spend less time with, doing all the work with the workflow and more time coding. So once you get this set up, basically it just keeps running for each build that you do, for each deployment that you do. Whenever you're using Azure DevOps, you got to think this is not just .NET code and it's not just Microsoft code. You can use any language that you want to out here, and on the back end of this, you can spin up any kind of servers to test out your code, any kind of servers, so it does Linux, Windows. You can push out to an iOS system. You can push out and bring up Android on a Linux server. I mean, it's pretty extensive. From an extensibility standpoint, as you're putting through and making some workflows out here inside of Azure Pipelines, you can bring in any other program that's supported in Azure DevOps. I've not seen one program that I've used that is not out there. Everybody has kind of adopted and put their programs out for use inside of Azure DevOps. From a container standpoint, you could put containers out there, Docker images, Kubernetes, and push out and have serverless configured containers out there. And like I said, from an open source standpoint, it's the way to go. Just kind of show you a picture of a pipeline that's sitting out there. So you start up and you kind of make a little artifact. You're going to pull your code in, and then you kind of go through stages. So think of this as environments. So I'll have a job that pushes something out to dev, and once tests get ran, then they can go to QA, and then they can go over here. And those pipelines allow you to push this out just by doing a build. So, or it could be gated to where I'm the code checker. I go through and make sure somebody's code's right. And when I say it's okay, well, then that kicks off one of these workflows too. So it's pretty extensible. But this is, like I said, kind of what makes it sing. From a test planning standpoint, it's a very, very extensible. You've got tests across the web and the desktop. There's also now testing that you can do on certain phones and certain builds of phones and Android versions and iOS versions that are out there. But what it allows you to do is capture all that data and then let you reproduce what happened from a code or a bug standpoint. It's easy to go, well, it didn't work. Well, what made it not work? You can track back in these tests and track down and say, oh, that's where it went wrong. From a graph standpoint, it always looks great. You're able to see code coverage, how much of the code that was ran through, smoke test, performance tests. You can also use other programs inside of here too. So think of a JMeter from a Java program to be able to get that telemetry data back from it to be able to display out here. Or Selenium, if you're doing some other user testing, that can be integrated in here as well. Then also manual tests can be in here too. So if you want to set up a test plan and your QA person is just manually, this is a great place to track it because it allows you to be able to report back that, yes, you went through all of these different modules, all these different features, and you tested out all these test scenarios. Azure Artifacts, like I said, this is where you can put all your package types at. So think of all the packages that are used across all of your different projects that you're using today. One place to store them, one place for them to get updated. So now you don't have to go back through and pull up each project and update them individually. Whenever you're doing a pipeline build from your code repository, you just say, hey, for these components, I want you to go out to my Azure Artifacts library and pull it from there. And then it will pull into this and use them across all of them. But basically what it comes down to is it lets you share your code very efficiently across all the projects. So as you can see, we've talked a lot about some Azure DevOps offerings that were inside of there, but think about all the other different products that you would use outside of that. So, you've got Ansible, you've got Jenkins and some Terraform. You may use some chef recipes, Puppet out there. All of these different items can be integrated into Azure DevOps. So I want you guys to think that it's not just the Microsoft product, it's the tool that lets you bring all those other items in there too. So it allows the developers to use what it is that they use that's right for them. So they may be using Visual Studio. They could be using anything else to do their code in. But from a back-end standpoint and a processing standpoint, all those other products that were out there, you can still use, and you can still use them in your pipelines. So in your pipeline, you could kick something off to Jenkins, or you could kick something off to Octopus to have it put something out there. The other cool thing too is it's not just an Azure type product. It's kind of weird that they named it Azure DevOps, but you can push to AWS, you can push to Google, you can use Docker images. Like I said, you could push to an iOS store. It's endless to the amount of openness that they brought to Azure DevOps. That's why a lot of open source projects are actually in Azure DevOps now. So going through a few more additional mentions, Azure DevOps is cool, but where the strength I think comes in is being able to automate up with Azure as well. So knowing that it is Microsoft, they've extensively utilized their own services out there as well. So from a self-service and dev testing standpoint, from the ops side, they can put together images that you can integrate in with and bring into those pipelines. So when you're doing your build, it's going to simplify your cloud environment. They can spin up dev test environments, use templates that are already made out there so that when you reproduce an environment and go from a QA to like a UAT environment or even to prod, that those are mimicked to the best that you could possibly do. And it just makes it a lot easier to do testing across this. The other thing too is as you're doing this through a pipeline, think of it doing a build, going out, spinning up one of these dev test environments, and then at the end of testing, tearing it back down. So it's not an environment that is sitting out there just spinning and collecting money as a VM out there. It goes away. And then the next time that you run this, spin it right back up. It doesn't have to sit out there and run all the time. The other thing that it allows you to do is, I'm sure that some of you may be already doing this through other programs, but bringing those programs into these pipelines as well. So infrastructure as code, and bringing that code into and having it support and do the automation around all of it is where the power comes in with the Azure DevOps platform. You can use Azure Resource Manager, all the automation inside of it, and then, like I said, any other third-party integrations that you already use to control your environments can be used inside of Azure DevOps. And then as that pipeline builds, bringing that in, spin up your environment, and everything's good. From a continuous security standpoint, Azure DevOps can be tracked inside of the Security Center. But just because things are happening, think of like the shadow ops people that are always out there trying to do something behind your back, you know. This kind of protects you against yourself. So from an operations standpoint, you can still see them out there. You can see what they're doing. And it's going to let you know if there's anything out there that needs to be fixed. But usually it's pretty locked down from an operations standpoint. But just in case it's opened up and the operations people come in here, it's going to start showing you, hey, you need to kind of fix these things. It is ISO certified and also SOC 2 certified. So I know everybody does audits. Just to let you know, this is audit certified. Then from a monitoring standpoint and application insights, as you go and you push your apps out, especially in the Azure environments, all of that tooling can be tracked. And it shows back up on your Azure monitor using application insights. And then you can pull the logs from the VMs or the PaaS services that you have running out there and see how your applications are actually running. So you can set thresholds, and from these insights that you have out there, you can actually spin up more VMs, add more processors, add more memory, you know, replicate it a little bit, do a little bit different things. The other thing that allows you to do too is to do root cause analysis on any issues that are out there. So as you're looking at this and you see errors, you can click down into those errors and then get some information about what was going on. If you're using other tooling or other existing processes like ServiceNow, all of this data can be pulled into ServiceNow too via web service. So Azure DevOps, it brings everything together. You've got your boards, you have your repos, pipelines, your test plans, and the artifacts. Basically what it lets you do is it lets you start working and planning and collaborating better and shipping out your products faster. Any developer in any platform, any cloud. It's got support for hybrid cloud too, so if you're using Azure Stack, already works. If somebody has some Linux servers and some Windows servers that are running on-prem, it actually works with on-prem servers too. So this just isn't just cloud. It can also be back into your own data center. You've got Azure DevOps services, so you know that you can use and implement any existing workflows that you have, and then also incorporate those in to what you've got out there today. Best in class for open source, so if you're using some Java programs and you want to utilize them in on your projects, that's fine. For any public projects, there's 10 concurrent free jobs that you can run. And then as we'll get into pricing in the next slide, it's free for small teams, and then it scales up, you know, as you go. So like I said, open source projects, free. You got 10 parallel jobs that you can run and unlimited minutes for your continuous integration and continuous delivery. It comes with the boards and the repos. It's completely free for open source projects. For smaller teams, back to the real world, I think, up to 5 users, Azure DevOps is free. You got 1,800 minutes that you can use for your pipelines per month, but that's one self-hosted job that's out there. You usually get away with a lot of it. And you've got unlimited stakeholders too. So the 5 free users, that would be people that are in there coding and that need to make pipelines and tests and things like that. What it doesn't have is for the stakeholders that just need to get out there and look at a board, those are unlimited. So I would put a little asterisk on there too that if you want to use it for doing builds and build servers, they've got a build service that's out there that you can use, and I think it's like $40 a month to use it, and it's unlimited minutes. So if you go up and beyond that 40, it's got the option to do an on-premise build server, which takes forever. I would say use the on-prem one for $40 a month. That way you can do just basically anything that you want to do out there. To your heart's content, make the pipeline as difficult as you want to. And then up above that, more users start at $6 a month per user. It comes in 10 packs, so it's $60 a month. But you can keep on adding users as much as you want to. So how to get started? That's a good question. That's what we do. So how to get started? We actually offer a 1-hour briefing where we go through and look at your current environment, give you some suggestions on approaches and things. That's more from a sales standpoint, them talking to you, just trying to understand what it is that you're doing. Another one is just discovery, where we do discovery engagements. It's more longer. It's 2 to 5 days. And this would be for people who don't currently have any code management processes. They may have some repositories that are out there, but we help with you and try to make you understand like where you're at now, where you're trying to go, and trying to get you there. We do a lot of Azure DevOps migrations, so going from one source code repository to another, and the complexities that go along inside of those. I will tell you, it is very tedious to take from one code repository to another. And we've got tons and tons of scripts that help automate up that process and make it seem not so hard. And then from an Azure DevOps maturity engagement, if you already have Azure DevOps, we can try to show you how it works and, the best practices and what you need to do with automation and what you need to do with testing and everything. I think if you look at the image that's in the middle, the continuous improvement process, this is what Azure DevOps is trying to bring to the table. And this is what we try to do when we walk into an organization to try to help, is if you start out with the purple circles there, just with the plan of getting some backlog items out there for your developers to work on and the team to work on. This could be database, it could be infrastructure too. So if you think about now I've got something to do, I need to run off, I need to develop that. When I'm done, I'm going to check my whatever it is back into the source control. And then there'll be automatic builds, hopefully from a maturity standpoint sometime. It could still be a manual kicked off build too. But at that point, you can do code quality checks and any other kind of QA testing that you'd want to do just on the build itself. After that, automatic provisioning of those environments. It's your configuration management and automatic deployment of those environments. So saving off your infrastructure as code is key here, and it helps you automate up and keep each one of those environments in sync with each other. From there, you go to automatic acceptance testing. This would be running through your QA tests, making sure that everything that was pushed out there looks good. You could also throw in there some automatic performance and load testing. With that, you'd know whether or not that change that you made degraded your system, or if you made that improvement, what's it going to do on my load, and how am I going to need to scale my environment to be able to withstand if all these people come in and start using this. From there, we'll go to release management. Release management can also be gated. So as all of these come through, they get the tests, they see all the reports, and they can click a button, or you can set it up to where if all those come through and meet a certain threshold and a severity level isn't hit, it just goes through automatically. And like I said, all the telemetry data from there also goes back through log management. You've got your automatic notifications of things happening, and all that gets fed right back into the funnel, goes back to either a product manager or a PM person, and they start planning out the next items. And that process is the continuous improvement process that we're trying to bring to the table and that Azure DevOps helps implement. So I will stop. I've talked a lot in the last, 25 minutes or so. Any questions so far? Anybody have anything? Tim, was there anything that came through? Anybody have like a, wow, that was awesome. What about this?
Yeah, thanks, Shad. I posted. I haven't seen any questions come in via the messaging system. If anyone has anything out there, feel free to send us a chat there or feel free to unmute yourself and pose it to the group. I'm sure if you have the question, others do as well. So Shad, now I'll make sure we stay on here for a few minutes. If anyone does have to jump off, just know that we will make sure to get all the registrants a copy of this presentation deck, hopefully by tomorrow. And then also we'll make sure we get this presentation edited and posted so you can watch the video back and share that as well.
So we do have some other upcoming webinars. Coming up on April 23rd, we've got an Office 365 content migration. On April 29th, Azure Synapse Analytics coming up. On April 30th, I will be doing another application modernization one. You guys go register for that one. But the registration link's out on oakwoodsys.com/events. So go out, check our calendar out, and sign up for the next ones.